If you never get a good night's sleep, it could be because you're sleeping at the wrong time. Believe it or not, your body has a genetic predetermined time for when to go to bed and when to wake up, and it can have a bigger impact on your sleep than anything else. Let me explain. Most people fall asleep every night and wake up every morning around the same time. This is called your circadian rhythm. But not everybody's circadian rhythm turns out to be the same. Historically, we've called those who like to stay up late night owls, and people who like to get up early as early birds. These labels describe your personal circadian rhythm. Your circadian rhythm can dictate your chronotype, which can be defined as a person's natural inclination of when they prefer to sleep or when they are most alert and energetic. Throughout the years, we've discovered something quite interesting. Our chronotypes are genetic. They're hard-coded into your DNA. That's why it's important to work with your chronotype and not against it. Let's dive a little further into each chronotype. All right, the first chronotype I call the lion. They tend to make up somewhere between 15 and 20% of the general population. They tend to wake up early, somewhere between 4:45 and about 5:15, with their core temperature rising about 90 minutes earlier than most other people. Lions tend to be most productive in the hours before noon, and they are best when they can immediately get started with their day's to-do list and getting things done sooner rather than later. After their day of work, lions tend to wind down and fall asleep in the early evening, somewhere between like 8 and 9 o'clock. Lions face their challenges head on with very clear objectives and goals. Think like a COO of a company. They tend to be characterized as prioritizing their own health and fitness and seek positive interactions. So how does one get the most out of being a lion? Well, go to bed early, wake up early, and work on exercising early in the morning. For caffeine, as with other daily routines of lions, it's best to have it earlier rather than later. Try to time having your coffee around 90 minutes after you wake up. All right, next is the bear. Bears tend to make up somewhere between 50 and 55% of the general population. 1 in 2 people is a bear. They tend to actually hit the snooze button once or twice, but still get up at a reasonable time. Think 7:45 to 8 o'clock or something like that. A bear's sleep-wake patterns usually match up with the solar cycle, which makes sense since they make up so much of the population. The regular working hours of 9 to 5 fit perfectly in line for the bear chronotype. I like to think of bears as kind of the glue that keeps society together. These people tend to get stuff done, being most productive in the mid-morning to early afternoon. After their day of work, bears actually have a tendency to wind down in the early evening, getting to bed around 10 o'clock. They also tend to be a bit more cautious, taking comfort in familiar situations, and have a tendency to be very kind to others. Adapting to a more regulated schedule for a 9 to 5 and exercise in the afternoon are critical to being the most optimal bear you can be. Something of note, I found that bears, that if they don't exercise before 1 p.m., it's probably not going to happen. It can be difficult, but try to set aside some time right around lunchtime to exercise, as it is so important to your physical and sleep health. For caffeine, just like lions, try to have your first cup of coffee around 90 minutes after you wake up. This will give you the most advantageous start to your morning, but be sure to stop caffeine consumption by 2 p.m. All right, before we get on to our next chronotype, if you enjoy this type of content, do me a favor and please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel below. Your support really helps the YouTube algorithm and allows me to keep making this type of sleep content for you in the future. All right, let's move on to the wolves. Wolves make up about 15 to 20% of the general population. They're classified as night owls. Wolves usually find themselves most productive in the late morning or late evening. They tend to not even feel tired until midnight or later. Wolves also tend to thrive as creatives. I mean, when do you think most creative people seem to get their inspiration? It's not 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it's usually 2 o'clock in the morning. So how does a wolf get the most out of their chronotype? Since wolves tend to want to stay up late and sleep in a bit, it's important to make your schedule work around this. First, you should try to time your exercise for early evening. Not only will this help out with maximizing your energy, but it will also give you ample time to rest in the morning, which wolves really crave. For caffeine, a few things to note for you wolves out there. You should be limiting the amount of caffeine to only once per day. You should only consume coffee in the earlier part of your day. Since wolves usually get their energy boost in the later part of the day, it really won't have a huge impact on having caffeine much later. All right, the last chronotype and easily the most complicated is the dolphin. Dolphins make up about 10% of the population, and they tend to be pretty erratic sleeper. Out of all the chronotypes, dolphins tend to have the hardest time becoming acclimated to a set schedule. They are normally characterized for being intelligent, maybe even a little high-strung or sensitive sleepers who are easily disturbed by light and noise. The fragmented sleep patterns of dolphins often overlap with symptoms of insomnia, which may be misdiagnosed on occasion. However, one benefit that dolphins do have is the productivity department. They tend to excel between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. every single day. They should typically aim to get to sleep around midnight and get up around 6:30. Now, I know what you're thinking. That may not seem like a tremendous amount of sleep, but trust me, you are going to feel a lot better if you're adjusting to this sleep timing. Exercise for dolphin is best timed in the morning. Not only will this give you peak energy for your workout, but it can also alleviate a few stressors and anxiety that can typically be found in the morning time for dolphins. And lastly, caffeine. Caffeine should be consumed at maximum twice a day. Once in the morning between about 8:30 to 10, and then maybe a second time between 1 and 2 p.m. This will ensure that you get the most out of your caffeine without disrupting your sleep. Now you might be asking, well, Dr. Breus, what chronotype am I? Do me a favor, head on over to chronoquiz.com. There you can find your exact chronotype and start to determine how best to work with your chronotype to support you as well as your sleep. Now, something that I get a lot of questions about is that I have a patient who takes the quiz and they don't agree with their chronotype. There's a few things that I want to say about this. First of all, we usually say that if you fit about 75 to 80% of the characteristics of the chronotype you're given, then it's pretty safe to assume that you fit in. But there may be some adjustments to this. Another question I get is, are there hybrid chronotypes? Believe it or not, the answer is yes. We call them adjacent chronotypes. These are most common in bears who are straddling the line between either being a lion or being a wolf. So the way I like to think about it is there are early bears and there are late bears. So it makes sense to familiarize yourself with the profile and the unique schedule of these second chronotypes. After actively working within your chronotype schedule, it might be incredibly beneficial to track your own progress on your sleep journey. Things you could be asking yourself are, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, how am I feeling upon awakening? Am I waking up naturally without an alarm? Have I been falling asleep in under 5 minutes? These can be tracked with something simple like a sleep journal, or if you're technologically savvy enough, through a sleep tracking app or notes app on your phone. With this tracking, you'll be able to see real data analytics on how your sleep is changing and how you are progressing while adapting to your chronotype. Well, there you have it. Everything you need to know about chronotypes. What chronotype are you? Let me know down below in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and are looking for ways to fall back asleep in the middle of the night, click the video right here. This is Dr. Michael Breus, the Sleep Doctor, wishing you sweet dreams.